I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business, comments from the mayor. I'd like to first read several appointments to boards and commissions, and then ask for a motion of approval by the council. For Croya, Jennifer Karras, to appoint her as the chair of this important institution here in the city. For Plan Commission, appoint Susan Athenson and Remo Piketty, and to appoint Rosemary Kerr as chairman, and then reappoint Monica Ruggles as a member. May I have a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved.
Second.
It's a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next, while I think many of you are aware of it, I thought we might make mention of it here at the council meeting, in that some 12 days ago, I received a letter from Metra, our railroad passenger service operator in these parts, describing in so many words that a third track on the Milwaukee District North Line in the west part of Lake Forest is not needed. And based on many meetings and hours of conversation with them, it's not needed for decades to come. So think in terms of 40 years or more. This letter effectively ends the potential for a third track, as I say, for a very long period of time. Metra is the owner and operator of that roadbed. And if they don't want it, it's very hard for a transportation committee in Springfield or in Washington to vote money for something that Metra's been, in the letter and in my conversations with them, very articulate about not needing. From the beginning of the proposal, it was evident to a number of observers that there were really two fault lines in this proposal. One, well, let me back up. There were two fault lines that for a proposal that was pressed upon Metra by two state agencies, not originating from inside of Metra. It was pressed on them by two state agencies. One, it was not needed for improvement of passenger operations, which can be better done at much less cost through switchgear and electronic controls of them. The second is that in today's public financing environment, particularly in the state of Illinois, but also federal funding for railways, there really is no reasonable prospect of the funding of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars for a third track from Rondout into Chicago, crowding out Metra's already chronic capital underfunding. So when the proposal came along and seeing these fault lines, and as a mayor of a city, like all other cities and villages along the rail line, having no authority, control, oversight, or of any type over this established rail corridor, I and the city manager embarked on persuasion. Shine our shoes and go talk to these folks and find out what's really cooking and see what we can do about it. And through many meetings with Metra senior staff and others, we were successful in getting Metra to the point of, in some ways, having the courage to write this letter that about the third track that had been pressed upon them. Such persuasion is really only possible in small groups and in a quiet way. And I think sorry about that, but that's how it works in life. And while it was asking a lot of patience of citizens of Lake Forest in that regard, it was, in Lake Forest's typical way, frankly, quite effective. I congratulate the senior staff of Metra for their honesty and courage in writing this letter, given all the state and federal politics involved. I personally found this team to be excellent. They're extremely knowledgeable of what they do, and they make the best of what funding they do have and all the masters they have, state, federal, local governments that feel, of course, a sense of ownership or stakeholding in Metra. So we go forward, vigilant. No one knows what the EA will say, so we'll see about all that. But I think the fault lines of there's no reasonable prospect of funding for this project relative to the priority of other projects, not only for Metra, but many other rail lines around the country, and the fact that it's simply not needed for operational enhancements for improved passenger service on that line puts an end to the matter for the foreseeable future. With that, I will turn it over for comments and remarks from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I know that the letter was music to a lot of people's ears, and staying with the topic of music, our first community spotlight this evening is the executive director of the Lake Forest Symphony, Timothy Corpus. Timothy?
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the time to speak about the updates of the Lake Forest Symphony as we continue to finish off our 60th anniversary season, which started in 1957 right here. The Symphony continues its programming in our flagship series, the Masterworks series, which most of the time performs at the James Lumber Center in Grayslake. But this recent season, we performed here in Lake Forest at the Lake Forest Academy, and next season will be at the Gorton Community Center. And we also have our chamber music series, which is hosted by the Gorton Center. We have a number of different community engagement initiatives, some that I'll highlight like Musical Memories. Other ones we're looking to partner with local community members, community organizations like Lake County Cares, where we hosted a recent food drive for members of the Lake County community. So just to catch you up on the recent history of the Symphony, because much has changed over the last 60 years, our recent history really starts in 2005 with the closing of Barrett College and the Drake Theater, which forced us to look for a venue that could seat about 75 musicians on stage. So we ended up at the James Lumber Center in Grayslake. Both the Lake Forest Academy and the Gorton Center are amazing establishments that help us out, but they can only fit about 40 musicians on stage. So fast forward a few years to 2013 and 14, where we had a applicant for a new conductor. We had over 150 different applicants from around the world, and WFMT Chicago, our classical music station, helped us with this project and formed a radio documentary, kind of showing the behind-the-scenes process of how you find a candidate. And the candidate we selected of 150 was Mr. Vladimir Kulenovich, who came to us from the Utah Symphony, where he was associate conductor. He has had an amazing career already at the young age of 38, and it continues where he's worked with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the San Francisco Symphony. And while working with us, he received Chicagoan of the Year from the Chicago Tribune, as well as one of the most prestigious conducting awards, the Schulte Award. So we're thrilled to have a conductor with a lot of excitement, a lot of energy right here in Lake Forest. I think one of the great bragging points is that more than 150 people wanted to work here in Lake Forest. In 2016, my predecessor, Susie Lape, had the great idea to bring us back home to Lake Forest, which is where our offices are now at the Gorton Community Center. And that really led the initiative to our Coming Home project, which brought our music and our musicians back to Lake Forest. So in our 60th anniversary, for the first time since 2005, the Symphony performed 2 concerts at Lake Forest Academy, where they worked with us to make the stage fit for our musicians, which was an amazing opportunity, well attended, and next year we'll be continuing at the Gorton Community Center. We have a whole new team, a whole new staff, almost double the size as it's been in recent history, with music librarians coming as far from the Met Opera in New York City just to work here. And our Gorton series continues to grow. We had 2 sold-out concerts, and it's really an evening of music, mingling, food, and socializing. It's a great date night, which we see as a great opportunity for the young professionals in the community. It's a great opportunity to showcase the Gorton Community Center and, of course, what's across the street in Market Square. So this program continues to grow as we'll add a 4th salon series next season. We also had the first 2 major commercial recordings in the history of the organization with Cedi Records, which is coming off of more than 5 Grammy nominations and more than 5 Grammy Awards in the last 8 years. So we're thrilled to have recorded 2 CDs with them at the James Lumber Center, one of which has already been released, and the other will be released at the end of this season. So we're working on upgrading the symphony, making it more modern, making it more accessible, embracing new marketing technology like Salesforce to really think about where do we go in the next 60 years. So I want to highlight one community engagement program that we have, which I think hits close to everyone's hearts, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. Musical Memories is a revolutionary program that is being spearheaded by ourselves, Lake Forest Place, Rosalind Franklin University, and North Shore University Health Systems. And basically, we're getting interest from an international health review board, Cambridge University Press, to write a book about this program, because this is more than just a concert for interested parties. This is a quantitative study on how music interacts with the brain and how it can repair memory. So the implications of this program are profound. We could slow down dementia. We could retain memories for anyone. And this program will continue over a number of years, and it is just getting started. But back home, we focus on audience development. So as you can see from this map, we have audience members coming from throughout the Chicagoland area, with great development in the past 3 years from Libertyville, Chicago proper, and up in Grays Lake, where we've been performing our flagship series. But what's next for the symphony as we embrace the next 60 years? I like to say this isn't your grandmother's orchestra. This is an exciting orchestra that's growing nonstop. In the next year, we'll have 6 concerts in Lake Forest, 2 flagship orchestra concerts, and 4 salon series. We're hosting a bicentennial celebration sponsored by the state, an official event in November where we'll feature 4 living Illinois-based composers. We decided to be as accessible as possible and dropped our ticket prices by 25%, the lowest they've been in 10 years. And we are embracing more technology, like I said, with Salesforce automated marketing and bringing on new partners that we can work with to impact the local community. We're also excited by the fact that the 2 albums that we recorded with Cedi Records have been submitted for Grammy recognition. So I'll be back in October to tell you about the award that we received for Best Record or what that is. We're also excited to be one of the only orchestras in the state of Illinois, one of the only major orchestras that programmed works by female composers, because diversity is important in the arts, and it's important here for us. And as we continue along the lines of developing with diversity, developing with new modern techniques, we're embracing new partners, new sponsorship opportunities, new ways that we can connect the community. Like I mentioned, we'll be here in Lake Forest in January, and that concert we're trying to turn into a Young Professionals Night. Because we have a number of people, if you get on the train like I do in Chicago at 4:30 or 5:30 p.m., there's over 100 young professionals coming from the businesses in our community, and it's time that we connect them with the arts that are coming from this community. We're updating our look. It's a modern orchestra for a modern world. We have a new website that'll be launched this year in the next month, a number of new different programs with our eyes on the prize of a Lake Forest Symphony app, a new way that audience members can interact with the symphony. You may have seen this brochure around town. We've already had 3 mailings done. We'll have another one coming up, but lots of color, lots of excitement, because Lake Forest is an exciting place, and we're going to show that to the world, because we know that more than 150 people were trying to work right here in Lake Forest. Our mission, that's just a brief part of our mission statement, but it's to foster a community that is enriched, educated, and transformed by the power of music. So I think, as the executive director, of how we're going to do that in this next year and over the next 3 years, I think the most important thing for us is to find partners. We're looking for partners, corporate sponsors, in-kind sponsors, anyone we can work with. How can we put another performance here in Lake Forest? building new audiences. We have amazing schools here, which we're working with the middle school, the high school, and of course the Country Day School to build that next audience, introduce free programming for the students. And then, of course, building our other audiences, young professionals, the elderly, those in healthcare systems with Lake Forest Place. So we need your help to reach out and get to everyone in this town that we can. Just to throw out one little thing about what's going on with the Lake Forest Symphony is that we are hosting our annual benefit for community engagement and outreach, featuring young student performers from Midwest young artists, from the high school, from the middle school, and that'll be here in Lake Forest on June 24th. It's an exciting time for the orchestra, so I invite you to join us. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Impressive. You're bringing the world to Lake Forest.
That's the goal.
And maybe we should do something.
Timothy, great presentation. That bicentennial concert, I didn't actually pick up the date, or maybe the slide just went by too
Sure.
fast.
November 10th and 11th, and that will be at the James Lumber Center. That concert,
So it's November 10th and 11th at the, that was.
At the
maybe I
Lumber
didn't
Center,
know the date,
yes.
But, okay.
it's the largest concert the orchestra has done in more than 5 years with 75 performers.
Okay.
So Timothy, before you sit down, if you could ask the community or the city council for one thing from the list, what would that one thing be that you, not you personally, but the symphony would like to ask for the community?
Connectivity. I think that there are a number of amazing organizations in my hallways at the Gorton Community Center, and we don't work together enough. Lake County Cares was an amazing first time that we've worked with a partner. There are a number of huge businesses here in town, and just north and just south, and we're not working together. That needs to change.
Seems like the right question and the right answer.
That's right.
Right. Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
Welcome home.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. The next spotlight is something we look forward to every year when the Preservation Foundation comes forward with their awards, because we're all interested in seeing the signs spread around town, although this year I think Mother Nature blew them all down shortly after you put them up. But the executive director of the Preservation Foundation, Marcy Kerr, is here to talk about the annual awards program.
Actually, our president, Jim Upsitnik, is going to do the presentation. I'm just going to try and man the screen.
Ah, okay. Well, Jim.
The word is that she's going to woman the screen. Mr. Mayor, nice to see you again, council members. We just met an hour ago at the train station, so this is a double decker here. The Lake Forest presentation, the preservation, this opening slide, is our newly approved LFPF logo. It's a product of many helpful suggestions by board members and others. We feature the term preservation since our target audience, of course, is Lake Forest. And we incorporated the lantern of the local gas light and adopted the color yellow to emphasize its warm glow and use of color other than the common forest green. Finally, to show the two iconic 1916 Market Square towers and the north and south Tudor long buildings, Charles Van Doren Shaw's design, that represent the community's commitment to preservation of the distinguished local historic visual character. This introductory slide for the 2018 award presentation also shows one of the garden gates of Howard Van Doren Shaw's 1909 completed The House of Four Winds, one of Lake Forest's best-known surviving estate gardens. It also illustrates the organization's commitment to maintaining Lake Forest's special garden and landscape character. The range of properties honored since 1991 covers large and small homes and businesses across the four wards, from West Lake Forest on Old Mill Road on the southwest to Sarasota Springs to Old Dutch Fence on the east side of Lake Road south of Spruce. The standards for judging structures and landscapes for awards are those of the Department of Interior, and as for the National Register of Historic Places. Our award winners include structures that have been rehabilitated or renovated to meet the Department of Interior standards. and rather than going off in a new style or directions, places newly constructed that fit into neighborhoods harmoniously. Infill, not landfill, as one person misunderstood us this year, is one of our important features that we try to recognize. Our first award goes to a small cottage on 611 East Illinois. It has been rehabilitated with a return to its original stucco facade from a long-time wood frame exterior. The new coat of stucco was put over the original, and there were modest changes beyond the streetscape view to the south. Rather than demolishing this century-old house to replace it with a new one, the owners chose to respect the simplicity of the arts and crafts original design. The house represents embedded energy as well. The Tesla in front demonstrates the owner's commitment to sustainability. By improving and restoring this house, they preserved the core of the century-old residence by recognizing its embedded energy, meaning the construction and the materials, to create the house in the first place. This has been attributed to Scottsborn neighborhood contractor Alexander Kelly, but the design is remarkably like a house featured in Herman Van Holst's 1913 Modern American Houses. Van Holst designed the 1929 addition to Melody Farms house, now Lake Forest Academy. These illustrations from the book show an intricate reform plan not unlike those of Frank Lloyd Wright in 1900 to 1910 that had one large room flow around a central fireplace, as in several houses locally by Shaw and Frost and Granger. Frost and Granger were also the people that designed our local train station. The second award for rehabilitation, but on a grander scale, entirely at 1 Stonegate Lane. This residence dates back to its first completion for James Miller in 1896 to designs by Henry Ives Cabot and built with surplus lumber from the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Jackson Park, Chicago. Within a decade of this was the home of Albert M. Day and his wife Fanny, and designed by their son-in-law architect James Gamble. The house, by the beginning of the 21st century, being right on the lake and shaded by tall old trees, never really dried out, and very likely its wood had deteriorated. When a renovation was begun, the house started to unravel. The city stopped work on the iconic old house, and because its used lumber began to just disintegrate. They referred the owners to a new architect, one of the most awarded by our organization, Diana Melikar. These two views show the house as it was when work was halted. This is then compared to the 2018 state of the house with its much more appropriately proportioned and detailed new wing. Note the manner in which the link to the garage in this frame steps down in materials and height, reflecting classic hierarchy of the form. These two views more accurately Georgian colonial revival entry treatment, avoiding the non-Georgian bump-out entry. Here is shown in two views the garage and family room addition with dormers better scaled to the house and with more depth and animation from the use of the mansard roof and frame exterior leading to the garage. Here the lakefront facade on the east side is more formally Georgian. The bluff itself had to be addressed to secure the house in a period of high water, and here a masonry series of ramps or breakwaters lead down to the shore. Here's the west and front auxiliary wing as they appear today. The most noticeable change, in addition to more Georgian colonial accuracy, being the brick facade, more durable into the future and perhaps the 22nd century. From the long drive at the east end of Illinois to its lower left illustration, shows what the public sees. On the right is the reconceived garage wing. Next slide. Okay. This is not a pyramid, but the south facade of the chapel of the academy at Woodlands Academy, the focal point of the campus designed by Chicago modernist firm, Lobel, Schlossman, and Bennett. This award is for the preservation of this historic over 50-year-old structure. The Department of Interior standards set this 50-year level for a structure to become, quote, historic. This historic gem is now more visible in the resculpted landscape from the greater Woodlands campus, including the former Barra grounds. This award honors what has been preserved and can now be better appreciated because of the clearance. These three views make the building scale in relation to the whole clearer. The doorway indicates the scale in its view from the west, along with the windows that let in later afternoon light to illuminate the altar area inside. The top right image also shows relationships to a 1961 larger residence hall further northwest. For architectural style context, this slide shows three chapels or churches contemporary with that of Woodlands. The larger view on the left is the much larger Air Force Academy Chapel near Colorado Springs, Colorado. The lower is Frank Lloyd Wright's 1950 Unitarian Society near Madison, Wisconsin. The next slide. Yeah. This commodious shingle-style house is also recognized for preservation, built in about 1910 for Hugh McBurney Johnson and his family, next door to his cousin, Hugh Johnson McBurney. This well-known house of the Four Winds, built almost at the same time. On the right is shown the stone exterior of the later 1920s library built by the next owners, the A.B. Dick Jr.'s. On the left shows a 1911 published view of Applegate, and notice the front porch in the southwest corner and the absence of the stone-clad library in the previous current view. The garden shown is new for the current owners, designed by Craig Bergman. The lower right image shows a segment of the wall along Laurel Avenue on the inside. This was built by the A.B. Dick Jr.'s architect Anderson and Tickner. The vine almost covering the masonry wall is native Virginia creeper. The Church of St. Mary's on Green Bay Road at Illinois is being recognized with a restoration award for its work on its windows, exterior, and terrace. The handsome 1910 church houses an active and generous congregation that has funded these improvements under the supervision of architect Frank Klepschit of the Associated Architects. The church was designed by Henry Lord Gay and an estate-era architect who also designed Old St. Patrick's Church on the southwest Lake Forest Settlers Square town area. Here we see the windows surrounded and mullions treated as limestone versus in the 1970s that these were de-emphasized with the color more like the walls. This view of the facade before, left, and after, right, shows the new focus on the whole versus each part. Now the shades of the limestone accent the universal and are universally in more stone-like tone. This newly constructed house replaces a 1970s house and is one of three in a block facing Lake Road, part of the old Bernard Eckert estate of 1907. The prominent south corner is situated nearby David Adler's 1916 Italian villa, in one of its most notable designs. Here the new house recalls Adler's 1917 house and Adler's most modern country place with its Viennese secessionist Art Deco accented courtyard fencing, which is a mouthful. This view on the side of 903 North Lake from the east end of Westminster shows the clustering of evergreens for future screening from the south. This charming new residence, modeled on a Western Connecticut country place rooted in a colonial farmhouse, replaces a 1960s house on this site. It faces east and west Lake Forest open lands, preserved countryside. To the east is a restored prairie that long ago was a notable farm and garden of the Sturtevants. To the west, as the landscape declines toward the Skokie River, on the near distance, again, is the Lake Forest open lands, whose custodian to the woodlot garden shaped by the neighbor to the south. Here, an authentic character of the New England farm turned into an estate is shown by a couple of Connecticut examples. For this house, the stone is of central proportion according to the hierarchy of form. The top right view shows the materials stepped down to wood, framed for the dormers in the attic and in the side addition or dependency. Below, a house that is all wood frame shows the massing of what's called the five-part form of Palladian villa. Art Miller is very detailed in his writing on this, I will tell you that. This is central mass and recessed linked, and then another gable and pavilion. And finally, the piece de resistance, the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, opened in 2018. This magnificent 450,000 square foot state-of-the-art health facility was designed by Pelley, Clark & Pelley, a leading global modernist architectural and planning firm. This building is indeed not just new construction, but also infill, not landfill. Infill perhaps inelegantly refers to new construction that fits harmoniously into its setting in the neighborhood and the community. Thus, the first big concession by the hospital was the restriction on height near this residential neighborhood. The result is a prairie-hugging curved system of pavilions, somewhat recalling Thomas Jefferson's University of Virginia. Across the arcade, interior and exterior, is an astounding water feature, two great basins with curving waterfall in between. In the next. Here you see the 8 places. You got it? There we go. Here you see the 8 places awarded, varying dramatically in size, age, and function. The styles range from arts and crafts to 21st century modern revival, with architects that range from James Gamble Rogers and Stanley D. Anderson a century ago to Cesar Pele's high-profile international firm today. Not just construction and preservation, but also top caliber design are alive and well in Lake Forest. All in all, scores of homes and property owners, their designers, builders, and landscape teams, and many preservation board members and other volunteers worked to make possible this celebration of Lake Forest's historic character being paid forward to future generations. Thank you for your support to Lake Forest Foundation, and we should have one more. Oop. We have one more slide because on June 10th, we are having a open house celebration of the renovated downtown train station. We had a ribbon cutting earlier today, but on June 10th, it will be open to the public. We invite people to bring their families, their children. We are having cake, ice cream. The tunnel between the two buildings will be open again for tours, which is always an exciting event. It was originally closed in the 70s and occasionally is open for tours of this type. David Mattoon will be conducting the tours, who is very knowledgeable about its history and its construction. And you'll also have the opportunity to see the restoration and renovation of the station, to bringing back aspects of the original construction, but with new and modern amenities like USB charging stations at the window ledge. So anyway, we have electricity at the train station and we're putting it to good use. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Marcy. Appreciate it. One final note, Susan Banks, if you could put up, this is, I guess you would call this a commercial for the Lake Forest Beach. City Council recall that last year, for the first time, we allowed the sale of alcohol at the beach, and it was a big hit. And actually, Memorial Day weekend, it was a huge hit because the weather cooperated. I think they did over $5,000 worth of concession business, which I would like to say I think is mostly ice cream and chicken nuggets. But we wanted to mention because last year I think we cut off all alcohol sales at 5 p.m. This year, Sally Swarthout and the staff at Kemper are suggesting that on Wednesday through Friday, we stay open till 7 p.m. and then on special event nights, like Sally is going to be programming karaoke nights and some other things down there, and that evening will be, or on those evenings, it will be stayed open later as well. One thing, and I think Alderman Newman will know this from his experience out at Deer Path, a lot of this is weather dependent. And so there may be times that the weather is not so cooperative, so they may close early. There may be a lot of people down there, and they may stay open a little later. So these are approximate times that are down there and will fluctuate because clearly we don't want people sitting down there with no business. That's not a good operational model. So these are how we go forward, or how we are proposing to go forward in the 2018 year. And I think, Susan, will have these on the website, is that right? So that people will have some ideas. But on the far right is the portable bar that we're utilizing this year. And hopefully people will get down there and enjoy a nice evening at Lake Forest Beach. And if you have any questions about that, I'll ask maybe Sally to come forward. Alderman Beidler?
Well, this one might be easy. I'm trying to do the math here. It looks like, am I missing Monday and Tuesday? So Monday and Tuesday, we're on our own?
Monday, you are missing Monday and Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday are 5 p.m., I believe, Sally, but I'll let you confirm.
Monday and Tuesday are, yes, they are 5 p.m., but I will let you know that for most of the Mondays, we actually have special events going on. That's a night we've targeted as bringing in open mic and karaoke and retro games. And we also have concerts, 2 concerts, one in July and one in August on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So, and I think also Kemper will weigh this as they go, and if they see the need to be a little bit more flexible in their time and their schedule, they will do that.
But so there will be availability. I'm not trying to sound too eager, but I'm wanting to be clear about my eagerness here. So pretty much every day,
Yeah.
there's going to be some sort of adult beverage service,
Certainly.
and in some cases till 7, and in some cases till 5. Okay, good.
Right. Sally, while you are there, because we did have the conversation, why not later on Saturdays? What's your experience about Saturday?
So based on my experience with beach operations, which is pretty extensive, people get up about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and go home. They go home and they get their kids' dinner and they get themselves ready to go out Saturday night. So we don't really have the clientele on a Saturday evening. Last year, being somebody who wanted to make sure that this program was fully vetted, I was down there quite a bit. And I can be personally attest to a pretty healthy business on Friday night and a very low number on Saturdays.
Thank you, Sally. And that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Next is a report from the Personnel Compensation and Administration Committee with respect to, with a recommendation for approval of the fiscal year 2019 personnel policies and administrative directives to be presented by Deshae Kalmar, Director of Human Resources for the City of Lake Forest.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I am back before you this evening to ask for your approval of our personnel policies and our administrative directives. There was a detailed outline in your agenda packet on what changes, or many of the directives are simply reviewed. We try and review them at a minimum of every 5 years, if not sooner, and what the changes are. I believe that you had in front of you the new Code of Ethics that was reviewed by the committee this morning. It does contain whistleblower language it's got our core values. Oh. Yeah, it's got the core values on the top, and then the whistleblower language underneath that. So that was the main change to the actual personnel policies. So that's what we're asking for approval for.
And
this
Deshay, can you
evening.
clarify that the changes to the whistleblower policy are directed by legal counsel based on state law?
Absolutely, yes.
They're fully consistent with state law.
They are completely compliant with state law.
Any questions of Deshay on this item? If not, from council, I'll ask any comment from the audience, any questions regarding this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 personnel policies and administrative directives as presented.
So, second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deshay, just
Deshay?
hold on a second.
Deshay, something else needs to be discussed. And that is that Deshay Calmer, Director of Human Resources, was recently awarded the Pacesetter Award from the National Public Employer Labor Relations Association. The award is presented to individuals who have demonstrated innovative leadership in public sector labor relations. It recognizes individuals who have successfully developed a new tool or technique to resolve conflicts, address new challenges, or assist others. Deshay was recognized for her innovative language regarding the Local Government Distribution Fund. Congratulations, Deshay.
Thank you.
Now you may sit down, Deshay.
Thank you.
That was a complete fake out. And well-deserved. Deshay is one of the wonderful constants amongst many on our city staff. Next is the opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. We have one person, Joanne Desmond, 1681 Yale Court, who wishes to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. On behalf of the Citizens for Action and our countless supporters, we wish to express our most sincere appreciation to our City Council, Mayor, and to all those who played a critical role in influencing Metra's decision to eliminate its request for a 3-mile freight train holding track in our community. We are cautiously optimistic that the final EA, when it is released later this summer, will reflect Metra's request. Citizens for Action does not oppose increasing Amtrak services, but any increase in dangerous and volatile freight traffic or idling of these trains near homes, schools, parks, churches, and offices has serious health, safety, and quality of life impacts on children and adults. Irreversible environmental impacts on our natural resources, more frequent and longer road closures and first responder delays, and diminishment of our property values. These are serious concerns for all our residents, whether they live near this rail corridor or not, because the future and character of our community and the well-being of those who live, study, play, or work along this Metra corridor is at stake. Although the Lake Forest Action Group appreciates Metra's revised recommendation that eliminates this 3-mile-long siding track in Lake Forest, we remain concerned about Metra's future vision to add another third rail the entire corridor that would only be necessary to allow for increased freight traffic. We strongly support more commuter and passenger service and hope that Action can work together with our city and all the municipalities along this corridor to influence the freight companies, controlling agencies, and elected officials to reduce dangerous freight train traffic through our communities, especially on the shared publicly owned Metra corridor. The separation of freight traffic away from passenger and commuter trains whenever possible is a health and safety priority for Action. We do know that our work is not finished if we are to preserve the quality of life and protection of our environment and natural resources for future generations, like our forefathers did for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne, for your thoughts, and we, like you, will remain vigilant. Thank you. Any others wishing to speak? Next item of business on the agenda is our items for omnibus vote consideration, and it being the beginnings of a new fiscal year, we have only 14 items here. Approval of the May 7th first session City Council meeting minutes. Approval of the May 7th, 2018 second session City Council meeting minutes. Approval of the May 21st, 2018 City Council workshop meeting minutes. Approval of the check register for the period April 21st to May 25th, 2018. Approval of a resolution of appreciation for retiring members of boards and commission. And we wish them well, and the city has run very well under their guidance, I might add. Number 8, approval of resolution supporting a revised intergovernmental agreement for membership in the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System. Number 9, approval of a contract with American Seal Coating of Indiana for the resurfacing of 5 tennis courts at Everett Park. Number 10, approval of the annual tree purchasing program for fiscal year 2019. 11, approval of a waiver of bid requirements and authorization for the purchase and installation of a Stryker power load system for our ambulances. Number 12, consideration of a recommendation from the Cemetery Commission to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Brush Architects, LLC, for historic architectural preservation and restoration design services of the Burrell Gate, our main entrance into the cemetery. Item 13, approval of council to designate Lake Forest Lacrosse Association a sole vendor and allow Lake Forest Recreation Department to pay Lake Forest Lacrosse Association the fees that they are entitled to per a memorandum of understanding reached with Lake Forest Recreation Department staff prior to this 2018 lacrosse season. And number 14, consideration of a recommendation from the city attorney and staff in support of a resolution directing consideration of amendments to Chapter 159.15 through 159.999, zoning of the City of Lake Forest Code relating to small wireless facilities. As we have done in the past, if there is any of these items that a council member would like to be removed and voted on separately, let's do that. Short of that, if there are any particular questions on these items.
Just for the record, I think you skipped over number 7.
I did.
Mr. Mayor, I believe it was number 6 and 7 got skipped.
Right.
Oh, you're right.
I thought that was just me.
May I add? Number 6, approval of a resolution of appreciation for retiring members of the Croya Youth Executive Committee. How could I do that? And number 7, approval of a grant payment in the amount of $50,000 to the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Historical Society for a grand total of 14 items. Any particular questions or comments on these items?
I just had one question on item 4 under the check register. I don't know if there's anybody here that can answer this, but I saw Deer Path Golf Course at $563,000. Is that some leftover invoices from last fall's work, or?
Oh, boy.
I know Elizabeth's not here.
Yeah. I don't know, but we'll get you an answer.
Okay. It just seemed high. I thought most of the work had been done last fall, but maybe the,
Yeah, I know, Chuck.
maybe the cart paths got finished.
Wait a minute, Sally has the answer. It might be the cart, end of the second payment of the cart path.
Yeah.
drainage work.
I believe that $500,000 of that is the transfer of the Nancy Hughes donation to the Park and Recreation Foundation.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank God you were here, Sally.
We should have had a note on that.
Our staff has the answer. Any other questions regarding these items? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve them as presented.
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Feidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is ordinances. And the first is consideration of an ordinance amending Section 135 of the City Code titled Noise Generally. This is a final reading of a matter we voted upon earlier to be introduced by Chuck Myers, Superintendent of Parks, Forestry, and Special Facilities.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. As you mentioned, I was here last month to talk about this, and we had discussion on the options and going forward, and the recommendation from the Public Works Committee was to change the hours as shown on the screen. It simplifies things a little bit with Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and then no blowers being allowed on Sundays or holidays. And we were careful to mention that this does not apply to other lawn equipment. Since that time, we have received a number of comments from landscape companies and also from residents. And I would say both sides of this. Some that are very supportive of this, that want to make these changes. Others that are concerned with some of the issues like homeowners not being able to use their blowers in the evening, and that this would be unfair to many. So we've heard some recommendations, and I know you have as well. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah.
As you said, I've had a lot of questions, and I'm wondering if we can reconsider the hours by going back to the Public Works Committee. I don't know if anybody else would support that on the council, but I think it's worth.
Well, why don't you make your points? Let's see how others think. If there's some,
Very good.
we feel all in together, there's some substance to that, we'll refer it back to Public Works.
I didn't Jed, I couldn't hear you.
To send it back to the Public Works Committee to get more input, because I've gotten a lot of negative feedback. I've gotten positive, but I've gotten a lot of negative feedback that people weren't seeing as coming and would like us to reconsider some of the hours.
It's the hours. I mean, was there any?
Yes, the hours.
Yeah. Did they coalesce into a bit of a recommendation or thought you'd
No,
have
I
for
wouldn't.
Public Works?
I would defer to the Public Works Committee. I mean, I had lots of, but I'm not in a position to say it should be this or that. I'd rather get more input from the
Yeah.
committee.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Do you want us to run down the line here?
Well, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, all right, well, I'm, reluctant as I am to speak. I feel,
First of all, do you have questions for Chuck?
oh, all right.
I mean, I
No,
think,
they're-
why don't we'll have a comments and
Okay.
discussion later, but why don't we do questions first?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Chuck, can you just frame at the aggregate level, how many noise complaints we get in the city on average for a year? And how many would you say percentage-wise are associated with leaf blowers? I guess that's the first question. And you can just give rough ranges. And then the second question is, I wasn't at the first reading, and I'm not a decimal expert, but do you have any sense on the noise differentials between a gas and a cordless or an electric leaf blower and then other lawn equipment? I'm just trying to understand the case for change here, just based on the data and the number of complaints and the severity of the impact with the actual thing that we're trying to prohibit.
Okay. On your first question, I did look into this a little bit, and I did speak with the police department to see who had formally complained. And over the last 5 years, it's averaged about 80 complaints a year. And those are for things like parties and motorcycles, all of those kind of things. So in general, all the different sound-related complaints, about 80 a year. Of that, they only had recorded 2 for blowers. And those were both in 2016. So far less than 1%, I guess, to be blunt about it. But I will point out that that's from people that have gone through the formal call to the police. There are probably many others that would say that they have contacted the city. I personally don't get a lot of phone calls other than for my own crews on a rare occasion, but it's very infrequent that our departments like community development get calls about blowers. If that's good enough, the second question, as far as to get a sense of the decibel levels, it's somewhat difficult because there are other things at play as well, with how far away and all the kind of things that you can well imagine, plus how many blowers and all that kind of stuff. In general, the newer blowers today, regular gas powered, probably in the 70 to 80 decibel level. That's not uncommon. The older ones were a lot higher. So they could be as high as 100 decibels. And you are correct, it is logarithmic. So it's a lot different than, if you look at a 10-point difference, that's double or triple the sound to the person listening to it. So 70 to 80 is gas. However, the electric or battery powered, 60 to 70, right in there. It's not huge, but like I just said, it is a big difference. However, they vary a lot. And I think when we excluded electric and battery powered, it was more of a environmental concern with the exhaust being completely exhaust free if you went with the battery. That was an incentive to do that. There is an advantage on noise, but I know some will argue that it's not enough to matter, and I know even some on the Public Works Committee were uncertain about the whole difference between an electric versus a gas-powered. There is some, though. I think that's clear from everything I looked at. There is some reduction.
I just have one more question. I think in the packet and the information, it said, I think it was before March 15th, 2001, that we actually had separate hours for gas and other lawn equipment. And it made reference to confusions around enforcement on the police's side or in the neighbors and confusion. I'm just curious how big an issue that was, and do you think we can mitigate it, if we can mitigate it this time around, or there'll still be some confusion that we'd have to manage?
Yeah, and in 2001, that was a major factor in making the change to the ordinance, was that it was just simply too confusing. And I know I had talked to the police about this in the past, and they said, yeah, it was confusing to people, and we just wanted to clean that up. There were other factors, but that was probably the main one. And if I had to speculate, yeah, there could be confusion. I think it's relatively simple because we've made the hours simple for the blowers. However, whenever you have two different level or hours for related equipment, of course, there's going to be potential for confusion. Hopefully not like in the past, but it could happen.
Thank you. Any question? Michelle?
Chuck, would you refresh my memory why we excluded Sunday in its entirety? There are people that work 6 days a week, and so I have gotten requests for, please don't not allow me to take care of my yard, including using my gas-powered blower on Sundays. So would you provide the rationale for excluding Sunday?
I think overall it was just that we needed, people were expressing a need for a quiet time on a weekend day. I don't think it went any beyond that. I don't think there was any real specific reason other than we needed a day that people could take a break from having to hear anything. And I think it's a valid point. Most of the landscape companies I talked to didn't have a huge problem with the restriction. One of them actually suggested that that would be a nice alternative to banning leaf blowers altogether, which, they would much rather go with an approach like that. But we had also, as we researched other communities, there were some other communities that had done this as well, to just have at least one day where you wouldn't have to hear the blowers in your local neighborhoods. So I think we put it in there as something that a lot of people were aware that the hours are much reduced anyway. You can see on the screen. I mean, right now it's 10 a.m. to 7:30. We at first talked about limiting those and just saying, hey, let's make them 10 to maybe 4. That was discussed, and in the end, we just said let's just do the no leaf blowers on those days, holidays and Sundays.
But it's interesting because for many of us, work-life balance has changed, and sometimes we work Saturdays and only have Sundays. So it is a very difficult situation to exclude a day that we'd like to all have a day of rest, but it's not always the same day of the week. My other question relates to the rationale for making this apart from other lawn maintenance equipment. Could you talk to that differentiation between blowers and other lawn maintenance?
Well, definitely some of the other pieces of equipment like lawnmowers are just as loud and even louder than blowers. So it had nothing to do with sound. It had more to do with, we thought it was going to impact people in a much bigger way. And what you were talking about before with residents, we thought about the scenario where if we would have just made this very simple and said this applies to all lawn equipment, that means you can't mow your grass on a Sunday. That seemed a little over the top and tough for anyone to deal with. So I think that was the prevailing thought on that, is it was too restrictive.
Maybe one last question, if I may. As someone who doesn't cut her own grass, when grass is cut, are blowers used in the same months that you cut your grass, or are they really more used for leaves, spring and fall?
Both, but definitely when they're doing lawns, whether it's a contractor or a homeowner, typically at the end you're blowing out either your beds or your driveway, that kind of thing. So it's just a final cleanup at the end, typically.
Thank you.
Alderman Newman?
It's been answered, thank you.
Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments? Well, there's certainly an old issue.
Comments, yes, but not questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
It's an old issue that's been around for a long period of time, and there's certainly no right answer. There's the need to maintain and keep our properties kempt. There is also, at the root of our ownership of our homes, a right to private enjoyment. And for people who have large lots, even acreage, there's sort of one impact of maintenance equipment and leaf blowers. If it takes place because of the landscaper schedules between 4 and 5 or 6 or something on a weekday or weekend, 10 feet from your patio, it's a gut-wrenching experience. And personally, myself, in 30 years of engagement with the city, I've heard more comments about this than anything once we got the dog poop ordinance passed.
Oops.
So with that, any comments or overview thoughts about the subject?
Well, I did want to mention that at our Ward 4 meeting a week and a half ago, this issue was raised by the residents, and I do see we have present in our audience a former alderman who was expressing concern, and I don't know whether we want to, at this point in time, invite public comment on this issue before we make any decision.
We will, but
Okay.
comments?
Based upon the input that I've seen, not only at our ward meeting, but subsequently with various emails, there seem to be a lot of questions raised about the proposal, and some of our aldermen now have raised those questions that have been raised earlier. So I do share the concern about what we're dealing with here and whether this is the right way, and it may be, but I don't have the answers at this stage.
I would strongly suggest that the Public Works Committee take this back up, and I'm concerned about Sundays in particular. I often work 6 days a week, and if I had to cut my own grass and I did use a blower, I wouldn't want to leave my job half done. But I do certainly am deferential to my neighbors, and certainly if they are using their patio and eating out, or I'm approaching, especially dinner time, that's not a time to be using the blower. So I do think we need to be conscientious, and so whether from a legislative perspective or otherwise, we do need to take that into account. So I would suggest that the Public Works Committee needs to do some more work.
Well, it sure isn't, yeah, I think that makes sense. It sure isn't easy. This is a classic case of regulation, and by definition, one size never fits all, so. Other comments?
Actually, when it came up, I guess it was at the last meeting, I pretty much thought it was much ado about nothing. So I voted for it just to kind of go along to get along, I guess. And then I started to hear a lot of the comments, and I saw, and I heard read or heard the one about, it's okay to regulate the landscapers, but we shouldn't be regulating individual residents. And that kind of hit home with me. So I don't think this issue can ever be resolved with 8 of us. I think Jed's idea of taking it back and looking at it one more time, I would certainly support.
The comments I hear have to do, and I've heard a few different versions of this tonight, is we need a break somewhere. So Chuck mentioned that we don't get any real relief from electric or non-gas, and we certainly don't get any from lawnmowers, so I'm not sure what we're really getting here. But if you thought about something on Sunday from any equipment from 10 to 4, and at 4 o'clock, nobody in town on Sunday or holidays can use a thing. That's a break for people. So maybe it's not what we're trying to regulate, it's when. And give everybody a chance to sit out on their patio one day that they know that they can do that without the sound invading their privacy. Just give us one little window here, I think is, because that's the common complaint is, that I hear is, I can't sit out on my patio. Well, how can we create a time to sit out on your patio? Sundays seems to be the day. People go out and party and go out to restaurants and things on Saturday night, but I think a lot of people are home on Sundays and holidays. Just something to consider.
I would concur with Tim's suggestion, which I think is very creative. I don't think we have this right yet. I do think there probably is some adjusting that could be done, but I don't think we're quite there. And I think sending it back to Public Works to look at something creative, I think that was a great idea. I am, and forgive me because I went off and did my coughing fit there for a while. I am actually also concerned about our professional lawn maintenance companies. And I'm not sure that 9 to 5, I think that's a pretty late start. From what I could tell, it sounded like that was going to be one job less a day for all of those companies. That's a lot. I mean, my main concern here is people needing Sunday to do their own property. So that's my number one concern. But the second concern really is, could we bump that back to 8:30 or even 8, or, you know, I don't know what splitting the difference between 7:30 and 9 is. And I'm fine with stopping at 5. I could probably be talked into 6. But that would give you during the week. If we stop it early enough, people could have their patio times during the week. But I think we've got to work on those hours a little bit more tightly, and I'd love to see Public Works do that. So again, not abandon the whole project, but just refine it.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Can I just add one more thing?
Just,
Can I just add one more thing? I think on the first reading, there was no enforcement contemplated, and I think Alderman Newman asked that question, and I think we could come up here with the exact precise formula for the days of the week and the hours. But if there's no enforcement, it really doesn't have a lot of teeth, and I think we're kind of spinning our wheels. I also think we should be encouraging our citizens to talk to each other and to reach out and communicate. And I understand the need to have some rules and guidelines, but anytime I'm next to somebody that's making noise, I'm hopefully gonna have a good relationship with them and, communicate with them what we're doing and why it's an important special night for me, and can you please tone it down? And I would expect the same courtesy from me. So let's not discount that, and let's consider enforcement as well, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of complaints here. And if we start over-regulating, we're going to get people to start keeping score, and I don't think that's the spirit of our town.
Mr. Mayor, it seems like there's a consensus that the proper motion would be to table the item and remand back to the Public Works Committee.
okay, so do I have a motion to table this item
So moved.
Second.
and remand back to Public Works? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to also cut off any public comment that may be here tonight.
sorry.
Because I've never known former Alderman John Luby to attend a meeting and not want to talk.
Yes, John Luby. Did we take the bat out of your hand, John, by remanding it to Public Works?
We missed you too, John.
Be careful, John, you had a consensus here.
We're all good. I mean, Alderman Kreschlak, I think you brought up some very good points on that. And in sitting on the council for a long period of time and actually dealing with this issue, it was important. And I think you have to look at the commercial guys get off the truck, they cut the grass, and 3 guys put on backpack blowers and go, rather than one individual that's out there. But I think you have to take into account what we've seen, particularly this year, last fall and this spring. How many Saturdays we had rain? Pouring rain. Knocked the leaves off the trees last fall. They came down. Snow's forecast in 4 days. What do? You got to try and get them up. I mean, I think you have to take that into account for when those things happen. We used to get, and I'll let the mayor, I'll point this out to you, far more complaints of motorcycles on Lake Road on Saturday and Sunday racing up and down. We've never addressed it. Should be no motorcycles. I mean, there is a sound issue that every week I'm out in the 4th Ward and I'm getting calls on that. I know we can't control the cigarette boats on the lake. That's a whole nother problem. And I think with another noise issue is the people going around doing their political things or whatever, ringing doorbells up to 9 o'clock at night on houses. We need to address that issue too. The mothers are at home, the dad's working somewhere, their doorbells are ringing, they're there with the kids. I think that that's an issue of noise and bothering people that we really need to look at carefully.
That's a good thought.
5 o'clock, when it's still light, is good. 9 o'clock, which happened a lot last fall, was a real issue. But I think sending this issue back to Public Works, we can discuss it. I think is great, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And that hours of the solicitor, put that on of the solicitors.
I will mention that hopefully everybody read the last issue of Dialogue from cover to cover, but we had in there actually a no solicitors placard that we really want people to cut out, and you can put those at your front door.
Exactly.
And that stops people, whether it's 5 o'clock or 9 o'clock, from ringing your doorbell. So we can't say that people can't, and I'd leave it up to the attorney, but the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled when they can be out and not be out. But what you can do is you can put that sign up, and I think we need to encourage more and more people to do that, because you can stop solicitors by posting that placard.
Excellent reminder. Would you like to speak on this issue, ma'am? I think the problem with the dialogue is folks fell asleep after the mayor's message.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Nugent. I live with my husband and children at 310 North Awani Road. And thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts on the proposed leaf blower ordinance. Let me start by saying that, generally speaking, I would prefer that we have fewer rather than more such ordinances. Ideally, we, as citizens of Lake Forest, would be able to successfully govern ourselves so that only minimal city-imposed ordinances would be necessary. Put you guys out of a job. However, among other things, such self-government requires common courtesy and thinking of ourselves as part of a larger community. Unfortunately, when we're not able to think and act that way, more governance becomes necessary. To me, the proposed leaf blower ordinance is an example of that. Now, I'm pretty sure most of us would agree that the noise gas-powered leaf blowers make is obnoxious. I also think that most of us would agree that such blowers do make certain yard tasks easier, and therefore their use serves a legitimate purpose. So the question is not if, but when is their use appropriate? We live near several large home properties where gas-powered leaf blowers and other lawn equipment are used regularly throughout the week, including late afternoons and early evenings on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. We have no problem with the reasonable use of this type of noisy lawn maintenance equipment. However, we think the regular use of this particular equipment on weekends and holidays, particularly during late afternoons and early evenings, is unreasonable. Typically, we find that almost every summer weekend and most holidays, when we're ready to sit out in our front yard, often with family and friends to enjoy the weather, outdoor cooking, and the beauty of Lake Forest, we hear the incessant sound of gas-powered leaf blowers coming from nearby neighbors' yards for hours and hours. Most of the time, we find that they're using the blowers at those hours to simply blow light, dirt, and similar debris off their porches, sidewalks, driveways, except when they're having their own outdoor gathering. In those cases, their leaf blowers are silent. On several occasions, we've tried speaking, whoever said, have a beer, talk with them, to the offending neighbors about the noise their leaf blowers are creating during these times. Their typical response to us has been, the city allows them to use this equipment until 7:30 any day of the week. We think it's too much where we live, and when we were talking with friends who live in areas where there are even smaller homes and they have some shared driveways or along the lot lines, the close proximity makes it even more of a nightmare for people when people are using those leaf blowers for hours. So many of our friends in town feel the same way. In fact, several of them begged me to come tonight and speak for them, concerned that their voices wouldn't be heard. So I urge you to consider this ordinance and please give us some respite from the noise of those gas-powered leaf blowers, after a reasonable time on Saturdays and all day on Sundays and holidays. And I'm open to any questions.
Alderman Newman would like to ask you a question.
Do you, any of the residents that you speak with, do any of them complain about noise in the morning?
No, they haven't. I mean, I think they just accept that. Like during the week, you mean?
Yeah,
when
7:30 in the morning.
7:30 in the
current start
morning?
time.
No,
Okay.
not really. I don't know what the hours are to start on Sunday morning. They might complain. I'm at church, I don't know. But it's really in the evenings, late afternoon and evenings. And it can go for 2 hours. I mean, a couple
I
of
read
them.
your letter when it came in, so I know what you're saying. I'm just trying to understand where the real irritation, morning or afternoon, because I think.
And in
there's an
general, I
opportunity.
think it's in the late afternoons, evenings, when people are trying to have cookouts. This time of year, there's so many graduation parties. One of our friends is concerned. They think their neighbors who always use their leaf blower are going to be gone the weekend they're having their graduation party, and they're thrilled.
Yeah, well, ma'am, I think you speak for a lot of silent people. For example, if you go to a cocktail party and bring this subject up, you're going to find most people say they're really obnoxious, and there's just certain times of the week, do we really have to have this? And that's the crux of why this thing was taken up to look at. And so there is no perfect answer. I have no perfect answer.
Thank you.
Any others that would like to speak? Thank you very much. With that, we are back to Public Works on the noise ordinance. Number 2 under ordinances, a recommendation for a spiller pays ordinance and related ordinances approving recommendations from the fire department. This is a first reading, and if desired by the city council, a final approval, presented by Kevin Cronin, the Deputy Chief of Fire.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm here to request the City Council approval of the spiller pays ordinance, which would help the city recover associated costs and replacement of damaged equipment, supplies used during a hazardous or various levels of hazardous materials incidents. And if the council determines appropriate, waive the first reading of the ordinance and grant final approval. And I'll take any questions if anybody has a question.
I have a question. I agree with the principle of the ordinance. How many spills do we have in a current year? I haven't seen any statistics. It may not be that many, but I'm just
We don't have very
curious.
many. We have rupture of gasoline tanks on automobiles and semi-trucks from accidents. We have replaced some equipment, turnout gear and stuff that absorbed diesel fuel and stuff and were unusable. But that came at an expense of the fire department on those kind of accidents. This would give us an alternative route to recoup some of the costs.
Follow up on that question, if there is an accident, an automobile accident, and the gas tank ruptures and there is a spill cleanup, is it that sort of incident you're thinking of applying this sort of statute to go to the one at fault in the accident?
It would apply to various incidents that, are detailed in here. That would be one of the level 1 hazardous where it's under 55 gallons of fuel. And it all depends. Normally, most tanks don't rupture and empty out the entire tank. A lot we can clean up with oil dry and, dispose of it. But it's the accidents that are of unusual nature. And
With a typical automobile accident where there's maybe some gasoline spillage and.
Yeah, most of the
I
time
was
the-
thinking a hose would hose it down or.
Yeah, most of the time the tow truck company helps us with removal of using oil dry and stuff of any spill, any fluid on the ground. We're just looking, there was an incident in one of the western part of Lake County that cost us quite a bit of money because of an incident. It was brought up to us at a Lake County Fire Chiefs meeting to look at a spiller pays ordinance. I reached out to the staff and city attorney and, we did not have one on the books at the time. And so we thought this is a good way to help protect the city.
Yeah, it's really intended to more formally recognize the outlays of the city as the insurance processes move forward from various kinds of accidents. And so we have a formal position or role in it.
I'm surprised we don't have this on the books already.
Well, that was the first thing I said. But it's because of one Western Lake County community that had 3 spills in a year or something, and that one of them got away from them at total cost, and there was no insurances or I don't know, there was not the backstop they needed.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other comment? Questions?
Mr. Mayor. Deputy Chief, I thought the pricing, the penalties were quite low, especially for the larger size spills. I would guess or estimate that your cost in a larger spill would be significantly more than the penalty.
I do believe in the ordinance itself, there is a fine but if there's equipment or, equipment that's used and damaged or unusable again, we can recoup that above the other fees and stuff that are on there.
Thank you.
May I also add to that there is a base penalty associated with any spill, no matter the cost. In addition to that, there's civil liability on the part of the owner or the spill or whoever has control, and that would extend to the full value of the spill itself.
Excellent. Thank you.
For the cleanup. Correct, and those penalties are cumulative.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any comment from the public with regard to this audience? Or with regard to this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Is there a motion to grant final approval of an ordinance amending section 135? Am I doing the right one? No. Excuse me. A motion to waive first reading of Spiller Pays ordinance and grant final approval to this ordinance as presented.
So moved. Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. The third ordinance for consideration this evening is a recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals in support of an amendment to the special use permit for the Gallery Restaurant, and if desired by council, waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance, to be presented by Catherine Zerniak, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a recommendation that comes to you from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Just a little bit of background. The Gallery Restaurant came before the council last September with a request for approval of a special use permit to allow a restaurant within 150 feet of a residential zoning district. The council did approve that ordinance. That recommendation, because it was a new special use permit, came to you from the Plan Commission. And the recommendation in support of the restaurant last September did include a patio. Because the neighbors raised some concern, one neighbor in particular, the business owners agreed to pull the patio out of the request last September just to allow an opportunity to see how the restaurant fared. Since last September, the restaurant has operated. It has been welcomed by members of the community, by neighboring property owners as a unique casual restaurant. To my knowledge, at least the Community Development Department has not received any complaints about the business, whether about parking or wild parties or late nights or light or noise or loitering. So the owners are now back before the city after several months of experience operating the restaurant, requesting an amendment to the special use permit to allow dining on the patio. This does come to you with a recommendation, a split vote from the Zoning Board of Appeals, but interestingly, every member of the Zoning Board of Appeals supported the amendment. The vote reflects a difference of opinion on on one particular condition. The property is located in the Central Business District on the north side of Wisconsin, about half a block west of Western Avenue. The property is immediately adjacent to residential zoning. in many of our business districts, we do have residential zoning that abuts commercial zoning. It's a transition district. It's always a challenge to create the right buffers and align the right types of uses in that area so there isn't significant disruption. Again, the property, this indicates the property by the air photo, the red dot. A little bit closer view. This is the restaurant. And the homes, a home on the neighboring corner, and then really 2.5 homes are most directly impacted by the restaurant.
Where was the patio from that overhead?
Where the star is.
It's very dark up there. I think on your monitors it may be a little clearer. The patio is right where the star is.
Okay.
It's an area that's located behind the building, which is somewhat of a reverse L-shaped. The patio is a little bit lower than the neighboring garages. You see neighboring garages, 2 of them really form a wall along the west property line with a small, a narrow strip between the 2 that is an open area. So it's really a very unique kind of almost an alley-like configuration. Because of the grade change, you do have those garage walls that extend up and almost enclose that patio. A very small area. The Zoning Board of Appeals did consider how best to mitigate the impacts of the patio. And you do have conditions detailed in the ordinance, but in summary, they put limitations on the number of people who could be on the patio at any one time, limited the days of operation and the hours of operation. When this originally came before the City Council last September, the intention was also to have afternoon and lunchtime activity on the patio. The current proposal would not allow any activity except dinner, limited to 5 days of the week. Latest operation will be on Friday and Saturdays till 10 p.m. There's a condition prohibiting any amplified music or outdoor speakers. The zoning board felt it was important to limit the activity on the patio to dining only. No receptions or cocktail type parties, which can tend to be more activity and noisier. They also recommended that the patio not be rented out to private parties, to third parties, but instead be used only for dinners. The conditions include requirements limiting lighting on the patio, the intensity, the location, the types of fixtures, requiring that the lighting be turned off and that cleanup of the patio be completed within 15 minutes after the closing time for the patio, and that the business owners provide enhanced screening along the west property line there up against the garages. If you've been out there, this is actually a conceptual sketch that was provided by the business owners. This is the garage, the northernmost garage. This is the garage next door. This is the patio area. Again, because of the grade change, it's sunken down a little bit. So those existing garage walls really wall off that patio quite well. The proposal from the business owners is to do plantings alongside the garage. Also have some plantings around the patio in pots to help absorb sound. And then in this area, the narrow area that essentially is a gap between the 2 garages, erect some lattice, sound curtain. This is also an art gallery, so the idea of doing some kind of a texture type fabric, in talking with our sound consultant, the plantings, the fabric, anything that can be put into that patio could help to absorb sound, particularly because you have that wall to the west. Below here are some pictures. The patio is very casual, nothing complicated about it. This is looking from the back of the restaurant to the northwest. So this is one garage, and this is the other garage. Again, the patio is an enclosed space. This is looking at those two garages, the area right between the two, a little bit closer. There is a utility pole and there are some wires. So again, it's not necessarily an elegant space, but it's a unique space that is really a neighborhood type business. Again, this is looking back at the garage. There have been some plantings that the business owners have already done in this area. And then I think I have one more that just is a little bit larger photo, again, standing at the back of the restaurant, looking toward the garages. The intent is to not pack this with a number of tables and chairs. The ordinance as written would allow up to 30 people. Currently, the layout of tables is probably closer to 16 or 20 people that could dine on the patio. If you choose to do so, you do have a recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals. You have an ordinance in front of you with findings and with the conditions of approval detailed in greater detail than I provided here. And you have an ordinance before you. Again, if you choose to do so, it would be appropriate to waive first reading and grant final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Kathy? Alderman Newell?
The stipulations that you set forth, are they to be included with the special use permit, or with these stipulations, would the vote have been 7-0?
Thank you. The condition over which there was disagreement was the condition that required ongoing measurement of sound levels. That was the one condition. The three nay votes on the motion, those board members specifically said that they felt that the requirement to do some ongoing measurements would be burdensome.
Right, I mean, who would do that?
We've actually, again, had an informal conversation with our sound consultant, and he could give us a protocol that likely it would be staff. We would conduct a simple measurement test through the neighborhood once a month or whatever we decided. Certainly, it could also be done on complaint basis.
My other question is there any precedent here for doing a special use permit like this on a temporary basis, say 3 months or something like that?
I believe that we may have had a special use permit. Actually, I think Elua Farm was supposed to, was approved with a requirement to come back to the Plan Commission after a certain amount of time. This is a seasonal activity. Mm-hmm. Certainly, we could prepare a memo and report back to the council after this season, if that was something you would like us to do.
Well, it seems to me there'd be a lot of support for this restaurant among people in town, so these restrictions seem reasonable to me. Why don't we give this, a shot for the summer and see how they manage it, and revisit it based on neighbor input and some data that we have.
Yeah, seems reasonable. There's also some investment, a fair amount of investment in this, so it might be one that's maybe driven by, maybe not a revote of it, but based on a problems seen basis or something. I'm a little cautious about, approving something and someone makes a effort at it. I think, there's some circumstances here.
It's a good
It's
point
not a
about the-
bar.
yeah, I mean,
There's not a bar. This is not a joint. This is a art gallery kind of restaurant.
Right.
So I'm going into it. I don't have a particular concern myself.
I would agree with Alderman Newman in the sense as, what if at the end of the season, the neighbors come back and say, this really didn't work for us, and despite all the good intentions, it's really a nuisance, and we'd like you to rethink this. So
That might give us the opportunity for the business to further mitigate sound issues and try to reach a consensus with the neighbors.
This is an absolute home run, I think, for the city. And it's kind of a shame that that it's not a home run for everybody, because there seems like there's two residents here, if I read it, like 797 and 811, that might be paying a bit of a price for this. So for sure, I'm in favor of the continuing monitoring. Kathy, I'd also ask you or others to keep looking at other means, perhaps, to provide a more better sound barrier, screens, decorative, not a new wall, but a kind of a decorative wall, et cetera, because I would, again, this is such a home run that it would be a shame that if two of the residences are throwing the party, so to speak.
I will just say, special use permits, in the event that the conditions are not met, can be rescinded by the city council or can be reconsidered. So I think what I'm hearing is support with the conditions, with the monitoring, with us continuing to work with the business owners to work toward mitigating sound impacts. And after this first season, perhaps to at least bring a report back. And certainly if we get significant complaints or input from neighbors,
Yeah,
this could certainly be
for
reconsidered.
cause like that. I mean, I just don't want to create a huge uncertainty for a small business owner. We have a hard enough time inculcating restaurants, so I don't want to have a continuing, lingering, I don't think it's fair. So I think I would propose in that supporting you, Alderman Reisenberg, in that thought, is that it would be reviewed and so forth as a special use permit for quote-unquote cause. However, Community Development Department feels that should be defined. Okay. Any comment from the public on this matter? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for a motion to waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance approving an amendment to the special use permit for the Gallery Restaurant to allow outdoor dining on the patio, subject to conditions of approval in accordance with the Zoning Board of Appeals recommendation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, in a related fashion, is a consideration of an ordinance amending the city's liquor code to create a new Class A4 license. It's a first reading and, if appropriate, final approval to be presented by Bob Pickrell, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, this ordinance you have before you seeks to amend a section 111.036 of the city code, which will create a new liquor license classification, the A4 liquor license classification. And as the mayor mentioned, this came from the gallery as well. Currently, the city code provides liquor licenses which will allow the package sale of wine and beer, but those liquor licenses do not permit the later consumption on the premises of that wine and beer. Now, recently, the city has embraced a BYOB in various forms, and what this liquor license classification would permit, the package sales of wine and beer on the premises for later consumption on the premises, so long as the A4 licensee also has a valid BYOB license. This consumption and sales is restricted in time on from Sunday to Thursday. It's from 2 until 8. Friday and Saturday, it's 2 until 9. Other than that, we amended the Class I1 licenses to accommodate this new A4 license. The I1 is the BYOB license. And that's basically it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Obviously, a highly articulated ordinance as part of our highly articulated liquor licensing program in the city for very articulate circumstances. Alderman Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What happens in the instance that someone brings their own and doesn't completely consume it and wants to take the remainder away?
There are mechanisms, so if you have a bottle of wine that you want to take away, there's ways to seal the wine. It's basically a technological solution. It's either in a bag. I've also seen, and there's even a device that will seal it once again. I've seen it. I'm told it works, but there are ways to seal these bottles back up so that they're safe for transport back to the home.
Have you been there?
I have not, but
I'm talking to
oh yeah.
Well, I have.
Alderman Moreno.
I have not.
So
I usually finish
the last
my
time I
alcohol,
was in
so-
there.
My understanding is this issue
That was
does not
yesterday
come up
morning
very
for
often.
breakfast with your.
So the last time I was there, which was fairly recently, my wife and I brought a bottle, and they decanted it for you. So it sort of encourages you to finish the thing and discourages you from pouring it back into the bottles. So
I will tell you, however, they did the same thing for me, decanted it, and my wife was just feeling just so we didn't finish the bottle, and she refused to allow me to do that for her. So they.
You don't have to drag your domestic life.
I'm sorry, I can't escape it.
This is
It goes
riveting.
wherever I go.
Riveting.
They poured it back in the bottle.
Is that called recanting?
I guess so, and they put the cork, they put the cork back in and, wrapped it in that protective thing, which allowed me from drinking it in the car, which would
to
have
be
caused
fully
an issue with
be fully
whomever.
compliant with the Illinois
Yeah,
Vehicle
no, it
Code.
wouldn't happen, not with Carl out there, for God's sakes, yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, any comment from the audience regarding this ordinance? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve an ordinance amending the Lake Forest Liquor Code to create a new Class A A4 license and amending the Class I1 license. This would be a first reading and final approval. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Seconded.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. I think the gallery is a marvelous addition. Lots of original thinking. And we could use lots more of these sort of comfortable local neighborhood eating establishments in our town, all across our town.
Mr. Mayor, am I right in thinking that possibly the owners are present tonight?
Are they?
And so can we?
There they are.
Wish you Godspeed in your
Yeah.
project. We love new restaurants in town, and for those of us like me who have not eaten there, this has persuaded me that this is the
Absolutely.
place to be.
It's wonderful.
So we're really thrilled that you're here, and we're delighted if we can make your life a little easier.
Congratulations. Yeah.
You found the golf course, you're finding new
Um,
restaurants.
Next item on the agenda is,
Selling me cards.
you guys can go back to the restaurant.
It's okay, I think it's fine.
Next item on the agenda is new business, a resolution of appreciation for City Attorney Victor Filippini, Jr. Whereas Victor P. Filippini Jr., attorney, formerly with Holland and Knight, and founder and partner, member of the Filippini Law Firm, LLP, served as legal counsel for the City of Lake Forest from 2000 to 2018, providing legal services, offering guidance on routine matters, guiding the city through complex negotiations, working tirelessly to keep the city out of litigation, and when necessary, representing the city well in matters involving litigation. And whereas on May the 2nd, 2016, Mr. Filippini was recognized by the mayor and city council for a notable achievement, receiving the Illinois Government Lawyers Association Litigation Award for his work related to preserving municipal zoning authority versus the state, I might add. And whereas during his tenure with the city, he provided wise and valuable counsel, leading efforts to update, clarify, and strengthen the overall city code, with special attention to code provisions relating to financial matters, historic preservation, architectural review, subdivisions, special use permits, and liquor licenses. And whereas during his 18-year tenure, he worked in a collaborative manner with local institutions, not-for-profit groups, residential and commercial developers, property owners, and residents on various notable projects, including but not limited to Conway Office Park, Eloa Farm, Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, the redevelopment of the city's former municipal services site at Laurel and Western, Gorton Community Center, the water treatment plant, Amberley Woods, Lake Forest College, the rehabilitation of Forest Park, numerous residential subdivisions, and that's just a short part of the long list. And whereas the projects in which Mr. Filippini was involved will serve the city well, long into the future by contributing significantly to the community's character, vitality, safety, and quality of life. And whereas Mr. Filippini was a respected member of the city team, educating city staff on the nuances of municipal law, making himself available to community groups and organizations to provide advice and direction, guiding boards and commissions on procedural matters, and thoughtfully developing solutions to problems, always with the long-term best interests of the city of Lake Forest as the overarching objective. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Forest, Illinois, hereby expresses the profound gratitude of the citizens and staff of the City of Lake Forest to Victor P. Filippini, Jr. for 18 years of loyal and faithful public service by means of this resolution, which shall be spread upon the permanent records of the City Council, and a signed copy of which shall be delivered to Mr. Filippini. May I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
If I may address the city council, I spoke with Vic today, and he really appreciated this resolution, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Bob. We surely mean it. About 60 days ago, the City Council decided to search for a new Lake Forest city attorney. A formal process began in this regard, the first step of which was to have the City Council's legal committee develop a request for proposal for city attorney legal services. The legal committee is comprised of 6 Lake Forest residents who are attorneys and include Alderman Rummel, with the mayor and city manager as ex officio members. The work of the committee is to advise City Council, the city attorney, and city staff on legal matters when requested. The request for proposal was sent to 13 firms, from which 8 proposals were received. 5 firms were eliminated for various reasons by the committee, including evident lack of qualification or appropriate experience, leaving 3 strong candidate firms: Holland and Knight, Klein, Thorpe and Jenkins, and Ansel Glink. These 3 firms were interviewed on May the 14th, at the conclusion of which the clear consensus choice was Julie Tappendorf of the Ansel Glink firm. The interviews were far-ranging and covered many topics. The background of attorney Tappendorf and Ansel Glink and related materials City Council has reviewed. Reference checks provided and reference checks pursued independently revealed a highly capable, respected, and thoroughly knowledgeable city attorney. As the city attorney is by appointment of the mayor with the consent of City Council, I now make the motion to appoint Julie Tappendorf as Lake Forest City Attorney, effective immediately, including participation in the June 18th City Council meeting and thereafter. Is there a second?
Second.
This is a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. That concludes the regular business of the council for tonight. The next regularly scheduled Lake Forest City Council meeting is Monday, June 18th at 6:30 p.m. At this time, the council will adjourn into executive session, and there will be no further business this evening after the executive session. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Illinois State Statutes, C6. The City Council will be discussing the disposition of property and the consideration for the sale or lease of property owned by the public body. Is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. We are adjourned into executive session. Thank you all.
How you doing?